prepare for the rebound? Let's get straight into our spotlight. And we're going to talk about air. After a year of no travel, how do we make sense of travel passes and the recovery ahead? And I'm very happy to have with us in Singapore, in the studio, we have Vinup Goel, who's Director General for Asia Pacific Regional Director of Airports and External Relations, IATA. Please take a seat.
Thank you.
And dialing in, hello, we have Subhas Menon, Director General of the Association of Asia Pacific Airlines. We have Steve Saxon, Partner China from McKinsey. And we have Julie Kais, who's Vice President, Global Air Partnerships, Expedia Group. Hello, everybody. And just let me go and grab my bottle of water before we begin. And so let's gauge the sentiment in the audience, shall we? And let's go to the first poll. And we're going to ask our audience how optimistic they feel right now. So compared to 3 months ago, how much more optimistic are you about some borders opening soon? All right? And the answers are A, 10% more. I'm being cautious, been disappointed too many times. B, 50% more, vaccine rollouts are going to help. C, 70% more, there's a growing sense of urgency by governments to open. And D, I'm just not a waging person, I prefer to wait and see. So Vinu, what's your answer?
Well, I think things are looking good. Vaccinations seem to be taking off in a number of countries. And governments are slowly getting to realize that they can't keep the populations within the country and they need to let them travel. So I'm an optimist.
Okay, so you're going for C. Okay, let's go to Julie. What's your, is it A, B, C, or D?
I'm going to go with B. I'm seeing a lot of enthusiasm after the vaccines have become more widely available here.
Okay. Subhas?
Well, I think, yes, I agree with Vinu, but I think we can be optimistic. I think, as you mentioned, the evidence of pent-up demand is always there. So we're just waiting for them to open all the hatches and we'll be jumping out.
Okay, C as well. Steve, come on,
Yes.
You're in China. You must be so optimistic right now.
My answer for the world might be a B. You said some borders opening. Unfortunately, my answer for China is probably A. China is going to remain closed for some time. It's a very large population here to vaccinate, which is going to take a long time.
All right. Okay, so now we go to Subhash, because I last saw you on a Zoom call, as we have all been doing, and you were doing a January media briefing, and your charts were like just going downwards, right? And you said basically in January, APAC Airlines carried just 3.9% of passengers compared to the previous January, but at least cargo, showed a marginal increase. So are we seeing some kind of upward, or, have we reached the bottom, or are we going further down?
Well, Sihun, unfortunately, in January and February, traffic receded again. And forward bookings are looking very weak. I guess the governments are spooked, by the rise in infections, as well as the mutant varieties, that are spreading across the globe, So I think borders will reopen only when governments are convinced that they have been able to control the spread of the virus, as well as when majority of their populations are immunized. Until then, I suppose we just have to hunker down and prepare ourselves for the reopening of the borders. But there is cause for optimism. For one, most of the airlines are still around. Thankfully, they are still around.
How many $1 million are they burning a month?
Yeah, they're burning a lot of dollars, but at the same time, they've been doing a lot of good, transporting vaccines, and you need them around, to be able to make sure that everyone in the world gets the vaccine that they deserve.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's go to Vinup, and you've been hard at work piloting the IATA Travel Pass, a lot of talk about that. And you have pilots now with several airlines, and I think today I read that Korean Air is also piloting. What lessons are you learning from this initial pilots?
So we have been talking to almost every airline across the world. And the first lesson was that everyone seems to be eager to do something about it. Now, I know, we all want borders to open, but it has to be done in a responsible manner. And so the WiT Travel Pass is just one of the solutions. There are others out there, and how you can get credible, secure health credentials, be it testing or vaccination. And so we want to give governments the confidence that when they open the borders, people who come in have the right certificates, but you also give passengers the confidence that, you know, I have the right certificates to travel, because no one wants to be stuck on the border.
Yeah, and we don't want it to be messy, right?
You don't want it to be messy.
And then you're going to have starts and stumbles,
Yeah,
and that's going to be
and so we need to get it right.
All
we
right.
need to get it right.
Okay, so getting it right is the biggest challenge. And Julie, you and I had a call, and we both celebrated the fact that we've both had our first jabs. Hooray, hooray! You know, and we each have been given documents. And Julie, you have a question to ask of Vinoop.
Yeah, I mean, I'm wondering how it's going to work. I've got this little piece of paper. How does this become a secure document that I can travel with? Everything seems to be paper-based in the initial rollout of vaccines. So how do you guys see that working?
That's a good question. So the travel pass is based on, it's a digital solution. We do expect that governments will have a central database of vaccinations, so we can tap into that. Or, you know, your paper credentials can also be converted in a secure manner to a digital credential. But having a paper-based certificate and having airline officials and immigration officers trying to see that piece of paper and trying to figure out whether this is real, trying to match it with you, is going to be such a huge problem when passengers return by millions. And we all know that these pieces of paper can be easily forged.
Absolutely.
And so what we are trying to do is to say, let's get confidence in the system and let's make sure it's safe and secure. And that can only be done through a digital solution. But yes, we have to incorporate paper documents in a way, or come up with another process to make sure that the paper holding people are not excluded from travel. They may need additional checks, additional other processes, but similar to check-in, you know, many of us like mobile check-in, but some of us may prefer to go to a counter, and there's a way to do that.
Right,
So,
you know, so I mean, there are lots of companies now trying to solve this problem, right?
Yeah.
And the big question is, well, what happens if I don't have a smartphone? What happens if I'm not, you know, I don't want to be vaccinated? You know, maybe there's going to be discrimination happening
It's
later
not
on, right?
going to be discrimination. It's just that you have to follow a different process. And if you are not vaccinated, maybe you need to go through additional tests.
Okay.
But we want everyone to travel.
All right, so when you say travel too, is like minus quarantine. So
Yes.
we have Dr. Walter Lee from Fullerton Health who will be coming on after this, and maybe he can, you know, tackle some of this sort of more granular questions regarding health certs. So let's go to some good news from Julie, right? And you live in Miami, Florida, where there was this spring break, and you know you had this huge deluge of visitors there. You know, so domestic travel in America just looks like it's already happening.
Yeah, well, domestic travel never entirely shut down in the United States. Our government actually incentivized airlines to continue flying throughout the pandemic. And so while demand was pretty low at the beginning, we've definitely seen a lot of that pent-up demand, especially to the warm weather destinations. People are sick of winter, sick of the same four walls around them. And places like Miami. We also have a lot of travel down to Mexico, which has had a lot of open borders with us for the duration of the time. Really effective testing being put in place by a lot of our hotel partners, where you can get tested on site. All you do is go to the concierge desk, get your test, and then you can fly home after your holidays. So there's a lot of interest in flying within the U.S., and there's not a lot of barriers to it at this point.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's amazing. We hear all this news, and then people are just crossing borders, whereas we are still kind of stuck behind our borders, right? And, you know, Expedia did a December study, and I was, you know, most curious about trend number 9, which was Flexcations. And this is based on verbal data, which is all around alternative accommodation, which is having such a breakout moment right now, and for road trips, you know. So can you talk a little bit about this trend? And do you see that, I see that it's also the same trend that's happening across the globe.
Yeah, the Flexcation is a really interesting concept where you go on a trip and you work for part of the time from that remote location. And since we're all working remotely, it's easy to do. And I'm like a true example. The day I got my jab, I actually booked a trip of Flexcations for myself coming up in April. It's a great way to get out of your home and to really, really experience travel while not necessarily losing work time, because of course we don't have enough vacation in the United States, period. So as a country, we don't have enough time off. So we might as well be able to work while we travel.
Yeah, I mean, definitely we're seeing destinations now going for this sort of vacations market, whether it's the Maldives or Dubai, and even South Africa. I was just getting a call from a friend seeing a lot of digital nomads there now, just working from South Africa. So let's go to China. And Steve, you just did a study called The Outlook for China Travel, and which was released this month. And for the first time, I mean, there was a piece of good news, was the fact that the number of Chinese travelers that were actually thinking of overseas travel outnumbered that of domestic travel. So that's the first flip that you've seen, right?
That's right. So domestic travel has been possible for several months in China, and I think we've seen that recover to close to pre-crisis levels here. And so in the early, we've run this survey 4 times now. In the early versions of the survey, people were saying, great, I want my next trip to be domestic. I want my next trip to be domestic. But in the last issue of the survey, in this January, we saw a shift, and we saw people saying, okay, I've done my domestic travel. I'm longing to go and see the world again. And 43% of people now said that I want my next trip to be outside China. It points to, again, there's a massive amount of latent pent-up demand, so that when borders and quarantines do come down, we will see travel return.
I mean, it's such a good sign, right? I mean, we can only stay home for so long, so everybody's kind of peeking over the border. So what was interesting too is I read the study, and their factors for destinations, the destinations they would choose, were close to 0 cases and no quarantine, which would apply to all travelers right now. So can we do poll number 2? And we're going to ask the audience, when you can travel again for holidays, how would you pick your destinations? Is it A, close to 0 cases? Is it B, no quarantine? Is it C, doesn't matter where my family is? Or D, doesn't matter, first place that opens? Vinoop, which would be yours?
A combination of A and B.
Okay, and Subhash?
Yes, combination of A and B.
Okay. Julie?
I'll go to D. Anywhere that's open, I'm ready.
You're just like me. You're a girl after my own heart. And Steve?
I'm in B. As soon as quarantines come down, I'll travel.
All right. So, it'd be interesting to see what the results of the poll are. All right. So I can't seem to see it here. But anyway, let's go to Subhash, right? And at the media briefing, you spoke about the need to harmonize protocols around travel passes. Because as a consumer, I am already so confused about how I can actually travel, and there's so many passes and apps out there. So why is AAPA not choosing to back just one pass?
Well, we don't have to choose any particular travel pass, as long as they are fit for purpose, and the purpose is basically to facilitate air travel and enable air travelers to go through these complicated processes. They're all fine, and they're all should be based on open source technology, which means that privacy concerns are addressed, as well as they should be compatible with each other, so that there's no need to choose. I think the bigger problem is we need governments to come to the party. Governments have to come and agree with the protocols and agree with the certification formats. They have to talk to each other and to accept each other's protocols and testing formats. Once that is done, I think it should be okay for whichever travel pass the airlines go for.
Okay, so Vinoop, is your responsibility to nudge the governments to talk to each other?
Yeah, so, one of the things we are doing is talking to governments worldwide, explaining what the travel pass does and explaining digital passes to them, then making sure they understand that this can replace paper and is more secure and faster and more efficient. But also, we are also trying to find out if there are any regulations that prohibit the implementation of digital solutions. And there are countries that have regulations that actually require a paper certificate. So we need to overturn those regulations and to make sure that digital solutions are available. And like Subhash mentioned, there can be multiple solutions. They have to be open source, and they have to be interoperable. And they can be modular so that you get to pick and choose. And we do not want the passengers to be confused, right?
Yeah, so you don't want the world to have 25 passes. Right,
yeah, but they can be compatible. It should be something that, like passengers are used to using different airline applications, this should be something as simple as that. So we, in fact, are trying to get our travel pass to be integrated into an airline app. So it's not a absolutely new
so it's not an IATA app, it's like a Singapore Airlines app, and within that is your system.
Yeah.
Okay, so we had a panel discussion with our fellow editors from North Star Travel Group, and Arnie Weisman, editor-in-chief of Travel Weekly, was really, really brave, and he stuck his neck out, and he felt that the common pass will end up as the leading pass. What do you think, Vinod? Anyway, and I asked him, I asked him to sum up his opinion, and this was what he said. This is the quotation. But basically, it came down to verification, right? And which is exactly the point that Julie had mentioned about, the paper cert and how it ends up in the app. Yeah. So what are you doing about verification?
So again, what is the objective of verification? To make sure that the information that is out there is correct, right? It's not fake. We have built our solution by security by design. So the labs are authorized. The link between the lab and the passenger is secure. And so the certificate that is shown on the person's app is also secure. But we also believe that privacy is important. So our solution has privacy by design so that the passenger is in full control and owns the data. It's not in some cloud or some central database anywhere, and the passenger chooses who to share that data with. So there are a number of factors, and yes, you can compare all these different solutions. I obviously do not agree with your editor-in-chief for obvious reasons, but let there be healthy competition and let passengers have a choice.
It makes us better.
Yeah,
you have competition like that, and so I'm going to put the the spotlight now on Subhash and say, can you pick a winner?
No, you can't pick a winner because you don't need to pick a winner. And I think the winner is going to be someone whom the traveler is going to say, hey, this works for me. This gets me from point A to point B without any hassle or headaches. That guy is going to be the winner, and that is how it's going to be applied on the airlines app.
Right. So the winner will be chosen by the customer, by the traveler.
Exactly.
And Julie, so if you can name one feature of the winner, what would it be?
Yeah, the winner, as Subhash says, is the one that's going to take friction out of the process. We've got too much friction in our industry right now that's keeping people from traveling. So any application that removes that and gives them clarity and communication about what to expect on their journey as they restart travel, that's going to be the winning solution or winning solutions.
Okay, so Steve, you are a corporate traveler, right? And so Subhash is saying that the customer would dictate the winner. So for you, what would be the winner?
Well, I think the governments are going to dictate the winner. The question is, which one do they trust sufficiently to have put in place the certification and the requirements that you can actually genuinely trust this? But even beyond that, unfortunately, for many countries, proof of vaccination alone is not going to be enough to remove quarantines and restrictions.
So a real battle, right? A real battle.
I think the winner at the end would be the travelers and the airlines and everyone in the travel and tourism business when people start traveling. Look, what app you use or what solution you use is sort of a small part. What we are trying to do is to get travel restarted, right? And the big win is over there, and not in which tool is being.
Okay. Yeah. So it's about really getting travel restarted minus quarantine. That's what we're talking about. Removing quarantine. Okay. So this has also been a breakout moment for tech, right? I mean, since we've had no customers to deal with, just a lot of refunds, it's a good time to kind of fix tech at the back of the house. So can each of you share an example of a piece of tech, whether it's an airline or a piece of tech, that you want to call out that has kind of stood out at this, during this period? Let's go to Subhash.
Well, I think the airlines have been trying to jump on the smart technology bandwagon for a very long time. I would say for at least the last decade. They've been upgrading their tech solutions. So this is a continuum. This is a series of improvements that they are doing. Under the present circumstances, I think there are some examples of airlines who are already doing this. I mean, Singapore Airlines, for example, pioneered the IATA Travel Pass solution by offering this for travelers between Singapore and London on the 16th of March. So that was great. I mean, it all went well. The traveler was able to find out what are the requirements he needs to fulfill before he commences his travel. He was able to get his certifications all on his mobile device, and he even got a confirmation that he has met all the requirements and he could travel. So it shows that travel passes work. So from that point of view, it is a big step up, for the whole travel industry. So
fantastic.
There you go.
So like a small step, but fantastic,
yes.
Right? It's very, very optimistic.
That's
so,
right.
Julie, you've been busy working with your airline partners.
Absolutely. So, as Subha said, a lot of airlines are taking the opportunity to build out technology that they've been working on for some time. One of the great examples from the United States was what American did very early on in the pandemic, because they were still flying to the Caribbean, which instituted testing procedures. So they were one of the first with a travel pass, the Verifly pass. And they managed it was born of operational necessity, but it's turned out to be a pretty good effort by them. And they also transitioned to touchless kiosks. 2,100 kiosks went touchless in about 2 weeks. So a lot of momentum and velocity happening, where maybe in the industry we haven't had that much velocity in the past. So I think that's probably a silver lining of what we've gone through here.
A real acceleration, clearly. Steve, how about what you're seeing from China?
Yeah, I think I'd point to some of the internal systems, especially on the commercial side. Like, demand has become so volatile. Like, you don't know where it's coming, when it's coming. Booking windows were already short in Asia. They've become even shorter. And so picking up early signals of where is demand coming back, when is demand coming back, and being able to put the right flights in the air at the right prices has required lots of analytics, which this industry has not used before. And I think that'll be here to stay, because you're not going to be able to use historical data to accurately forecast demand and therefore accurately price flights.
Yeah, I mean, the booking window is also being impacted by the airlines' inability to plan far ahead anyway, right? I mean, the airlines are just planning 4 weeks in advance.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so let's go to, again, IATA, and you've predicted recovery to 2019 levels by 2025, am I right?
By 2024,
Hedging your bets there, okay. And Steve, in the McKinsey study, there's a chart that you show recovery by country, and we see that China is leading it at 2022. We have Japan at 2025. This is quite interesting. And let's go to the audience now to ask them, when they think global travel will get back to 2019 levels. And the first answer is 2023. Is it 2024? Is it 2025? Or D, maybe we shouldn't use 2019 as a benchmark anymore. Are you still sticking to 2024 or 2025?
I'm sticking to 2024.
2024, okay, so you moved it up a notch. Subhash.
Well, I mean, I think a lot hinges on vaccine deployment and vaccine equity. On current form, it looks like while the developed world will be done and dusted by the end of this year, a lot of developing countries, will take a long time for the majority of the populations to be immunized. For example, some of them, will not be immunized until 2023 or late 2023 or early 2024.
Yeah.
So I would say the time frame, for recovery would be probably end of 2024, maybe early 2025.
All right. Julie, do you agree with any of those numbers there? Any of those years stand out to you as kind of weird or?
It's so hard. I don't think any of us really have a crystal ball. I do know that it's going to come back in segments. I mean, there are certain leisure destinations in the United States where we're seeing 2019 numbers already. But there are other segments that are going to lag behind. So it's kind of hard to say exactly when the whole thing will come back. Yeah. So I'm going to go with maybe all of the above.
And maybe we shouldn't use 2019 anymore, right? Because it is a blank slate, right? And this is a brand new world that we're moving into. Steve, how did McKinsey come up with those numbers? Are we to trust those numbers?
Yeah, so those ones look at tourism recovery. And I think the reason China is the fastest is because of the vibrant domestic tourism market, which is still open and is still growing. I think if we're looking at global and international numbers, we're looking at more like 2024, 2025. And that's because there are some segments of demand which are not going to come back. Like we do see a structural decline in corporate travel, for example. And over time, the leisure travel will grow back to pick up for that corporate travel, but it takes time to get back to those levels.
Yeah, everybody also, we are all very optimistic people working in travel, and, we're all kind of consoling ourselves and say, oh, this is a good period for travel because travel is going to get better after this. Like we're all going to learn our lessons and it's going to get better after this. So can you give each of you one brief example of how you think travel will be better AC after COVID?
I think travel will be better after COVID because just from a airline processing viewpoint, there will be an acceptance of digital solutions, the travel passes, and acceptance of using a biometrics and contactless travel. And we are seeing new solutions that are coming in place. And the industry has been trying to change the paper-based, check-in boarding pass process for a long time. Some successes were there before COVID, but I think after COVID, you will see a totally different digital journey that uses your face for all the processes from check-in to deplaning and entry into countries.
So this is the magic bullet. Okay, let's go to Julie.
I think I'm just going to have greater gratitude for it. I always knew that travel was a force for good. When it was taken away from me, it was really reinforced. And I think the rest of the world is seeing that as well.
Steve?
I'm going to go with safer. I think a number of the things around making sure that hotels, aircraft are clean, hygienic, masks are worn in some cases, that extra checks will stick. And it will therefore be safer when it returns.
Okay, and Subhash?
Well, a lot of energy has gone into trying to overcome this pandemic. So I think travel will be better because I guess we'll be future-proof.
I like that. I hope so. I hope that we will be prepared for the next one. Because my next question to the audience and to you two is the next poll, which is, what will be the biggest challenge facing travel long after COVID becomes a distant memory? A, is it the growing anti-travel movement by environmentalists? B, is it increased pollution of tourism destinations because, frankly, memories are short? Is it C, increased government regulation following industry bailouts? Is it D, backlash against big tech, privacy and data concerns of consumers? Or is it E, insufficient airline capacity to meet pent-up demand? What is it for you, Vinod?
I would like to say the last one, but I think one of the key sort of challenges or priorities for the industry has to be sustainability. We do have the opportunity to change the conversation because the industry is sort of starting afresh. And there's a lot of focus on sustainability. The people expect it. And here's a chance to make sure that we grow back in a sustainable manner. The industry already had very aggressive and responsible targets. And this is probably going to define us in the long term.
And Subhash, to that point, you stated your sustainability goals for IAPA, which is 50% reduction in net emissions by 2050 using 2005 levels as a gauge?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not only for airlines. I think it is the aviation industry's target, which was established through the Waypoint exercise, by coming up with credible means, to get there. Basically 4 pillars, using market-based methods, aircraft technologies, operations, and infrastructure, as well as greater use of sustainable aviation fuel. So I think, while borders are closed, I think airlines are not sitting on their hands. They're doing whatever they can to make sure that, the process is in place and their commitment to meet those targets are well on course. So that's I think a very important step forward. I think these challenges that we are talking about, whether it be sustainability or whether it be safe travel or smart travel processes, they are pre-existing issues, pre-existing concerns. They only become more pronounced as a result of COVID. So we have an opportunity, to make sure that we get it right, and we are, definitely into gear by the time borders reopen.
Yeah, and we need to speed it up because the consumers are way ahead of us. So, Julie, what would you say would be the biggest challenge facing travel long after COVID is gone?
I wouldn't frame it as a challenge, but I would also echo the sustainability message. Okay. I think it's an opportunity. And I think that the environmentalists and the airlines are on the same side and have a shared common goal of making this industry and making travel sustainable.
Okay, Steve, do you have a different answer?
I was going to tell you, I think the travel industry's got to fill the gap from the corporate travelers. So who's going to sit in all those business class seats intercontinentally? Who's going to fill the conferencing facilities in the hotels? I think that's going to require some innovation.
Okay, so final question, one-word answer if possible, right? What's the dream trip that you want to make as soon as you can?
Egypt.
Okay. Subhash?
Patagonia.
Patagonia. Julie?
Galapagos Islands.
Wow. And Steve?
Manchester, to see my family.
On that note, thank you very much, Vinoop, Julie, Steve, and Subhash for leading us on the way to recovery. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
All right.